This week, as we continue our series, Little Giants, remember what we've been looking at God having always been in the business of doing extraordinary things with ordinary people or ordinary choices, right? Things that have giant consequences, but are kind of little in their execution by way of maybe things that seem simple to us or easily relatable to us, that we undervalue their impact in our lives. And so that is exactly where we're going to go this week. We're going to be in the book of Judges. It's in your Old Testament of the Bible. It is Judges chapter 3 in particular. We're going to start in verse 12, but I just want to lay this out for everybody. This is kind of disclaimer here. This is one of my favorite Bible stories. And that's going to sound a little twisted when you hear the Bible story, but the reason that it's one of my favorite Bible stories, one, I think many of us are a little unfamiliar with it. We're a little bit unfamiliar with what actually unfolds, because remember, the Bible is not some G-rated VeggieTales version of a book. It is very much real. And this particular story that we're going to be in this week has kind of, the best way I could say it is it has kind of a mini-series epic episode vibe to it. That's kind of where things are, right? Especially in the last probably 5 to 10 years with the, I guess, kind of a revolution of streaming services and new platforms to launch television shows and series on. There kind of come these kind of straight-to-you series, and a lot of them are filmed as almost like individual movie episodes. You all know what I'm talking about, because that's kind of how things are done now. This story has like an epic mini-series episode vibe to it. And sometimes for us, it can be really difficult, because what ends up happening is we read a story like this in Scripture, and it's hard for us to wrap our heads around that this is a real event that happened to real people in a real place at a real time. Because sometimes it seems so far away because we can't quite relate, but we're going to relate right out of the gate. I didn't mean to rhyme on purpose, but as soon as it came out, I thought, oof, I've been preaching way too long. Everything rhymes. That's what happens when you grow up listening to rap music and then you become a preacher. It's just how it works, and it comes out. And in all seriousness, we'll read a story like this, and we'll kind of figure, it'll capture my attention, but how does it help me lace up my shoes to put feet to my faith? Because that can be hard with some of these Old Testament narratives. But I'm going to give you some things tonight that are very simple that will help us connect with this story and let it help us lace up our shoes. And tonight, we're going to be talking about a man named Ehud. Now, if this is going to be difficult for you, I'm going to give you a very cheesy thing that's going to help you always remember Judges chapter 3. You ready? Tonight, we're going to be talking about Ehud, the left-handed dude. Now, yes, that was a stretch. That was a dad rhyme stretch. I know that that's what it was. I don't care, because you're going to remember it. Ehud, the left-handed dude. Check out this story in Judges 3, verse 12. If you have your phone, your Bible, screen, you know the drill. It is there for you. Here it goes. Once again, the Israelites, this would be God's people, once again, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. And the Lord gave King Eglon of Moab control over Israel because of their evil. See, I said out the gate we can relate. Maybe some of us feel like we can kind of look around, captivated by a sinful culture. Maybe even sometimes captive by a sinful culture. At times it may feel in our lives that we look out and we see so much bad everywhere, and we wonder what's going on. If you've ever felt like that, as you look out in a culture that promotes selfishness over service and sacrifice, in a culture that promotes me, and kind of focuses on the elevation of personal maybe preference and fame and acclaim, and we look out and we kind of see this in society, and we wonder what's going on. The people of Israel were right there with you. They understood. And listen what happened. In verse 13, Eglon, this kind of evil king, enlisted the Ammonites and the Amalekites and the Mosquitobites. That's not in there. That's just checking if you're listening. As allies. These were kind of neighboring tribes that would almost kind of act as like marauders sometimes with people. Yes, I said marauders. I read old books. And then he went out and with these allies defeated Israel, taking possession of Jericho, the city of palms, and the Israelites, listen to this, served Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. 18 years. I get impatient watching the clock count down on the microwavable popcorn in my kitchen. And that's 3.5 minutes. Can you imagine the Israelite people for 18 years? But let's keep going in verse 15. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, the Lord again, see, God's in the business. You're going to see in the Old Testament of your Bible, it is a cycle of God's people drifting away from God's way and him raising up a rescue to bring them back. It is God's faithfulness to his people even when he is unfaithful to him. Somebody just needed that encouragement. Maybe you feel like you look around and see that we as a society aren't being as faithful to God and wondering, is God going to be faithful to us? God never changes. We do, but God never changes. And as long as we surrender to that, God will always be faithful. Maybe you even feel like that in your own life. Maybe you feel like God's been silent. That doesn't mean he's been absent. That just maybe means he's up to something. And so maybe that encouragement is for somebody this week. It said the Lord again raised up a rescuer to save them. His name was Ehud. Remember the left-handed dude? Son of Gera. Now check it out because it actually says it right here. Ehud, son of Gera, a left-handed man of the tribe of Benjamin. Now I need to stop right here because I said that and no one laughed. No one in the whole room laughed. No one got it. No one cared. Just right over, like water off a duck's back. Just rolled right off you. Didn't even, but I want you to see something here. In its original language, if you were reading that and you would kind of, hop in your time machine and go back several thousand years and you were reading that and you were part of that culture, you were part of that people group, you would have read that and you would have laughed. Do you know why? Because the tribe of Benjamin, to understand it, God's people had kind of split into these kind of moving communities, these things called tribes. And they were named after certain people, and they kind of spread out in the area. The tribe of Benjamin, literally in its translation, means son of my right hand. So if you read this, you read Ehud, a left-handed man, a tribe of the right-handed tribe. You're like, what? That's like I can remember, I can remember when I was in high school, we had a strength coach for our football team. His name was Jim, which I always thought was funny because we would go to the gym to train with Jim. And I'm like, that's a perfect name for a strength coach, man. Jim, your name is Jim. You literally work at a gym and your name's Jim. Hey, what do you do for a living? I'm Jim. No, but what do you do for a living? Jim. No, but seriously, I don't know what's your name or what you do. Yeah, Jim at the gym. Jim, that's what I do. Jim, his nickname was Tiny. And Jim was nothing close to tiny. Jim was 225 pounds of pure muscle. Pure muscle. And he looked like it. Shaved head, close shaved head. Looked like a guy who you would be scared of at a distance. I could see his traps from 300 feet away. He could be wearing a turtleneck and I could see him. It was crazy. I would come in and just see this man just kind of plucking at his abs in the mirror and being like, I think I ate too much pizza. I can only see 8 of them. I'm like, oh, I don't even have 1. You got 8. Jim's nickname was Tiny. He won lifting competitions. He could squat 1,000 pounds. He could bench press 500 pounds. He was a mixed martial arts fighter. That's literally what he did. He was like that just quintessential textbook, scary, very big, beastly, bald man. And his name was Tiny. This is like one of those. You think about that? You meet this guy and he's like, hey, I'm Tiny. You're like, nope, you're not. And then he's like, yes, I am. You're like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to argue with you, sir. You're scary. Right? It kind of had, you look at Ehud and it's like, here's Ehud, the left-handed man with all those right-handed folks. You're like, oh, okay. See, you didn't know the Bible was funny like that. Sometimes you read the Bible and you don't realize, like, it's funny. I mean, we've talked about this before, right? The author in the Gospels, especially in Luke, like when Luke just kind of throws shade at Zacchaeus. He's like, Zacchaeus was a notorious sinner, super short guy. And you're like, I don't know if that was like a way you just described people or if you were just trying to, let me slight him real quick, right? The Bible is funny, but it's also epic in this story. But for some of you, just kind of moratorium, so to speak, on Ehud, the left-handed dude. Some of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, feel like the left-handed dude in a right-handed tribe. Some of us maybe feel like we are a little bit different. And sometimes when you feel a little bit different, that happens because you look around, or maybe you look on your phone and you see people doing this, and this, and you're not doing any of those things. Maybe you see people getting this, and this, and you're not getting any of those things. Maybe you see people who have this talent and this type of capability and this, and you don't have any of that. And so you feel a little bit different. And sometimes what we do is we take feeling different and translate that into feeling less than. Well, I can't do this because fill in the blank. Well, I don't think I will be as successful because fill in the blank. Well, I've made these decisions before, so fill in the blank. And so you feel a little bit different. But I want to encourage you with this. Just like Ehud, the left-handed dude, is going to show us here in this story. Let me encourage you with this. You were made uniquely on purpose, with purpose, for a purpose. And that purpose is to know God and make him known. And you're going to be encouraged by this epic story. Listen to what happens as we go on. So there's Ehud, a left-handed man of the tribe of Benjamin. And so the Israelites sent Ehud to deliver their tribute money to King Eglon of Moab. So basically, Eglon takes over, takes them captive, and of course, what does he do? Like any evil leader, he starts charging them money to simply exist under him. And so the Israelites sent him to deliver their tribute money. So Ehud made a double-edged dagger that was about a foot long, and he strapped it to his right thigh, keeping it hidden under his clothing. If you've ever seen the movie The Hobbit, this is where I geek out for a second. Basically, picture a hobbit's sword. That's basically what it was, but the blade went both ways. Does that make sense? It's a double. So if you can picture that, some of you are like, I've never seen it, and I'm not a dork like you. I don't take offense to that. Google it. You'll understand what I mean. Like it's about a foot and a half long, a double-edged sword on his right thigh. And he kept it hidden under his clothing. He brought the tribute money to Eglon, who was very fat. Some of you were like, that's not in there. You want me to read it again? It's in there. It's in there in every translation. It's actually in there. I told you, the Bible is real. You imagine Eglon, he was a bad guy. I mean, it's already talked about. Yeah, he was a bad guy. He enlisted this, he was listed this. He was like, if that wasn't enough, hey, Eglon was very fat. And you read that and you're like, come on, man, what's that have to do with the story? You ever been around people who share a story sometimes and they share details that you don't care about at all? You don't. This happens all the time. I can see it sometimes. Me and my wife will be having a conversation and I know I'll be giving her details about something and I can see it on her face. I was like, she has transitioned from interested to uninterested. I see it. I watch it happen. She sees it with me. It happens with my kids. I'll be giving them instructions. I'll be telling them to do something, and I can see it physically happen to them where they immediately become completely uninterested in what I'm saying. Now, kids are a little bit more upfront about it because they literally just walk away. So it's easier to tell when they are completely uninterested. And so you think to yourself, why would he put this in there? But here it goes. You ready? After delivering the payment, Ehud started home with those who had helped carry the tribute. This is a lot of money, so he couldn't carry it on himself. It's not like he couldn't just show up to Eglon and say, hey, I'll Venmo you. Let me Venmo you. It wasn't like that. They're talking like just dragging hundreds of pounds. But when Ehud reached the stone idols near Gilgal, he turned back. So basically, he gives him the money. They do their thing. Here you go. Yep, we owe you this tribute. This is how this works. And then they take off. But when they got to a certain place on their way out, he stopped and he turned back. And he came to Eglon and said, hey, I have a secret message for you. Now, it doesn't say he whispered, but anytime I read, I have a secret message for you, I just naturally read that as, I have a secret message for you. I don't know if he whispered or not. For all I know, he could have yelled at him, hey, I got a secret message for you, which just seems like an oxymoron, right? If you go to some, hey, I got something I don't want you to tell anybody. Everybody, come on around here. I'm going to tell this person, I don't want them to tell anybody. Like, you know what I mean? So you just assume it was like, okay, he's a little. So the king commanded his servants, everybody be quiet, be quiet. And he sent them all out of the room. See, Ehud was a man of the people, sent by the people, who probably had a word from the people. And if you're an evil king, you want to keep tabs on things because you love being in power. Once you have power, you don't want to let it go. So he probably thought that Ehud would have maybe some inside information because he's thinking, Ehud's on my level. He's giving me money. He's submitting to my authority. So maybe he's going to update me on some stuff going on. And so Ehud took advantage of that. He said, I have a message. And so Ehud walked over to Eglon, who had just sent all of his people out, all of his guards, all of his inner circle people. He had just sent them out. He's sitting alone in this cool room, in an upstairs room in the area. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And at this point, Eglon knew, oh no. He does not want to pay me lip service. He does not have inside information. Something is not right. And as King Eglon rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, pulled out the dagger strapped to his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. The dagger went so deep that the handle disappeared beneath the king's fat. So Ehud just left it in there. And the king's bowels emptied. Some of you are like, that's not what that says. That is what that says. Some of you said, bowels emptied. I would tell you to Google it, but I don't think I can tell you to Google that. Then Ehud closed and locked the doors of the room and escaped down the latrine. You could look that up for yourself and figure out what kind of escape that was like. That's not the type of escape room you pay $100 for and take photos of, I'll tell you that. He didn't selfie that escape room. I can tell you that right now. After Ehud was gone, the king's servants returned and found the doors to the upstairs room locked. They thought the king was going to the bathroom. So they waited. They're like, I don't know. Did you see him? I think he had Del Taco. Just leave him alone, man. Just leave him alone. Yeah, he definitely. He had a bean burrito. I think he had a party pack, actually. I don't know. Yeah, he had like 2 sodas. I think just leave him alone. Leave him alone. I saw him take a magazine in there. Just leave him be. Just leave him be, right? They literally says they thought he was using the latrine, so they waited. But when the king didn't come out after a long delay, they became concerned and they got a key. And when they opened the doors, they found their master dead on the floor. And while the servants were waiting, Ehud escaped, passing the stone idols on his way. And when he arrived to the hill country of Ephraim, Ehud sounded a call to arms. They had planned this out. Then he led a band of Israelites down from the hills. Follow me, he said, for the Lord has given you victory over Moab, your enemy. So they followed him, and the Israelites took control of the shallow crossings of the Jordan across from Moab, preventing anyone from crossing. They attacked the Moabites and killed about 10,000 of their strongest, most able-bodied warriors. Not one of them escaped. So Moab was conquered by Israel that day, and there was peace in the land for 80 years. When you read a story like this, you think to yourself, whoa, I didn't know that was in the Bible. And once you get past this kind of epic mini-series nature to a story like this, then you start to ask the question, if you're like me, what does that have to do with my life? And I want you to consider some things, because when I read a story like this, I immediately think, okay, God, this is a situation that is highly unlikely that I will find myself in. I don't plan on escaping down any type of latrine. I don't even think they use the word latrine anymore. I definitely don't pay tribute to some crazy king. I don't even own a sword, much less a sword with 2 blades. I'm right-handed. I'm not left-handed. if I needed to learn how to do stuff right, you start thinking like I would never be able to identify. And then I kind of wonder, as a Christian in 21st century American culture, how do I do anything with this? How does this come alive in such a way that it invades my space and pushes me further in my relationship with Jesus? And I kind of think that the early church, early Christians, early followers of Jesus, I bet they wrestled with that question in a similar way. Sometimes we forget that they were real people trying to figure out what this gospel was really all about when it came to becoming the focal point of their lives, that they're just following the teachings of Jesus, and what do we do with that? But early Christians, the early church, they would have known this story. See, the early church, they would have known the religious traditions of the time, church and stuff, right? Early Christians would have known kind of those stories. They would have known the old folk songs that their granddaddies used to sing that we call psalms, right? They would have known these tunes. They would have known kind of the tales of old. In this Old Testament narrative, in the story of God's people and the Israelite people, like they would have known these things, and they probably would have wrestled with a few questions which would say, okay, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? Well, this week I'm going to give you two things that we can do with this, and it's going to come from the people of Israel themselves. Ehud may be the character, he may be the little giant that we look at this week, but it's actually the behavior of the people that I want us to look at. And I want to draw it out of here and sketch it into our own life story and look at it through a lens that is relatable and applicable to our lives. Look at what the people did. And the Israelites served Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. Verse 14, verse 15. Check this out. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord again raised up a rescuer to save them. His name was Ehud, and then what does it say? The Israelites sent Ehud to deliver their tribute money. I want to give you two things, and I'm going to give you two questions. If you're a note taker, this is your time to shine. This is your time to get excited. You can pull out your phone, your notepad, whatever it is. Two things that the people of Israel did. You ready? One, they cried out. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, one, they cried out. Two, they sent Ehud. What did they do? They cried out. They contributed. They contributed. When they cried out to the Lord for help, God sent a rescuer, Ehud. And so what did they do? They worked with Ehud. They sent Ehud. There was a plan. I already said that. We circled back to it, right? We knew that was happening. People were set up and ready to go on the attack once Ehud crossed over to a certain path. There was planning involved. They were a part of the process. They cried out and they contributed. So here's the questions for all of us. Because there may not be some Eglon ruling over your life. You may not be in that type of situation, but there might be something ruling over your life. There might be something hanging over you. There might be something kind of personally plaguing you that you struggle with, maybe in secret, or maybe some people know about. Maybe there's some stuff going on. Maybe you look out into culture and it worries you. It scares you a little bit. Maybe you have some family relationships that are a little strained and it weighs you down. Maybe there's people in your life who you love and you know they don't know Jesus, and so that starts to burden your spirit, so to speak. I'm going to give you two questions to ask in every situation in life. Two questions to ask. You ready? Question one, am I going to God about it? Am I going to God about it? That's such a simple question, but how many of us are guilty of this? Look, I'll be the first to raise my hand, right? How many of us are guilty of prayer becoming our last resort instead of our first response? How many of us do that? Well, I got to fix this. I'm worried about this. This is bad. This is, this. And then finally we've had enough and like, okay, God, I'm ready to talk. I'm exhausted for trying to fix this myself. Am I going to God about it? Question number two. Am I doing anything about it? See, the smallest step of obedience will go further than the greatest intention ever will. Because hope is not a strategy, and intentions are great, but unless you put feet to your intentions, you never get anywhere. Are you tracking with what I'm saying? The people of Israel cried out to God, and then they contributed. They contributed. But let's get real for a second. Let's get up in everybody's face. This is when we start to offend each other, right? Because I'm about to say some things that many of us in the room, I can see it. You're going to have one of those bing moments, right? The little light bulb over the head. This is what's going to happen to everybody, because I'm going to tell you right now, even though I am a, quote, professional Christian, I do it too. So I'm just telling you right now, most of us will wrestle with what I'm about to say. Look at the people of Israel. Understand for just a second here. Understand for just a second. The people of Israel knew who God was. They followed God. They followed God through the wilderness. They saw God do what only God can do. It's been told in modern day movies, the stories of the people of Exodus and the stories of the people of Israel and Adam and Eve, and they knew these stories, and Noah, and there was Abraham. There were so many things that they knew. They had seen God deliver them, God deliver them, God deliver them. They knew who God was. They worshiped God. They were serious about it. But it took them 18 years to cry out to God. Did you catch that? Because it doesn't say, but after the people had been crying out for 18 years, that's not what that says. Do you understand? Literally, one line. The Israelites served Eglon for 18 years. But when? See, I think sometimes the Israelites maybe got into the habit sometimes of making prayer their last resort, not their first response. And they would drift further away. How many of us, though, we read that and we think, oh, Israelites, man, how could they have done this? But think about this, because I believe most of us actually wrestle with this. How come it is so easy for us and others to trust God with our eternal soul, but it's so hard to trust Him with everything else? I'm going to say that again because I saw a lot of people be like, oh, I do it too. We are so willing to trust God with the salvation of our very souls, but we find it so difficult to trust God in May of 2021. We find it so hard to trust God in everything else. I want to encourage you guys with this. Understand if you're feeling that way. You're normal. Welcome to the club, so to speak. Many of us struggle with this, but understand. God has always been in the business of raising up a rescue. Do you track with that? See, our eternity with Christ relies on the cross. When Jesus, knowing that we could not make our way to Him, sent His Son, or Jesus came to earth and made a way to us. Do you understand that? See, the Israelites relied on God for a rescue, just like the people of God relied on God for a rescue. Our eternity as believers, our eternity as human beings with Christ relies on the cross. God, knowing we couldn't make our way to Him, sending Jesus to make a way to us. Dead in our sin, separated from God, God raised up a rescue through the resurrection of Jesus. So we were lost in our sin, but we were liberated by His love. We trust God with that salvation so freely, but it is so hard for us to trust God in what is going wrong in my life today. I do it too. When we preach to ourselves. There just happen to be a lot of people in the room looking at us. That is what we do, but I want to encourage you guys. No. That's not what we learn here. Are you going to God about it? And are you doing something about it? If you trust Him with your eternity, can you trust Him with everything else? Because the truth is there's a lot of things that weigh over us. There are a lot of things that weigh on us. In this day and age, it is so much easier to feel less than. It is so much easier to feel burdened. I believe personally that our access to more creates more hurdles in our spiritual walk with Jesus. I truly believe that because there's so much more that literally pops up in front of our face that can distract us from God's best. I firmly believe that. And so we get kind of ruled, we get kind of taken captive, so to speak, by so many different things in our lives. Fear, worry, pride. We want people to see what we wish people would think. Some of us think pride is just an extra level of arrogance. That is not what pride is. Pride is pretending. Pride is wanting people to think about you what you wish they would think about you. So you portray yourself in a way that makes people see you the way you wish they would think about you. How many of us are captive by that? Bitterness. How many of us struggle to forgive? Oh, ready for this? Let's get up in everybody's face. How many of us are captive by sexual desires? Pornography. How many things weigh over us in life? Those are some dangerous ones, right? Those are some detrimental ones. Maybe some of us are captive by good things in our lives. We look out and we think, God, we want people to know you, Jesus. We want people to see you. We want people to follow you. I have a heart, I have a passion for the lost. Are you going to God about it? Are you doing anything about it? You ready for this? Because I'm going to tell you flat out, here's how it works. If you fight for your limitations, you often get to keep them. So if we value sin over surrender, we end up being distracted by the ways of the world, thus drifting further away from God's best. But that is not what God wants for us. So instead, find success through surrender, because God's way is always better than our way. Are you going to God about it? And are you doing anything about it? You want help in any of those areas? You struggle with A, B, C, or D? You struggle with any of those? When's the last time you went to God? When's the last time you brought it to God? You opened up this book. You know, He speaks all the time. It's right here. When's the last time you read His Word and received that voice of the Holy Spirit, that counselor that God sent, that we hear through His Word, through communing with God's people, through pushing into our relationship? Are you going to God about it? And are you going to do anything about it? Hey, I struggle with this. Have you told somebody? Have you told somebody you weren't made to be alone? You were made to be a communal being. The church is a place of imperfect people. We don't allow perfect people because they don't exist. What are you doing about it? Because here's what I'm convinced of. I'm convinced that many of us are looking for a rescue. Insert anything, fill in the blank. Everybody is unique. Everybody is different. Everybody has their own journey that they are on with Jesus through life. So you can insert anything that you may come up with. Boom, click the drop down arrow and find your thing that might be kind of over you. And most of us are just reaching out for a rescue. We're looking for a rescue. And I am convinced of this. I'm convinced of the personal approach that I'm going to just share with everyone that I've wrestled with in my own life. And it's this. I just want to pose this. Could it be that the rescue we are looking for in our lives is actually found through the redemption that God does in our lives? See, could it be that change that we're looking for actually starts here and flows from the inside out? Because help comes from God. But healing only happens when hearts are surrendered to Jesus. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is real. And if it sounds like I'm getting intense, it's because I am getting intense. You know why? Because again, I could toss up a mirror and preach this to my very own self. And I've known this story of Ehud for a long, long time. But 2 questions for everybody to ask this week and in every situation that comes up in life. It may sound simple, it may sound basic, but basic is brilliant. And little is giant. 2 questions. Am I going to God about it? And am I doing anything about it? Where is my faith? And am I going to put feet to it? That's the encouragement for all of us this week. Take it, lace up your shoes, let it invade your space, let it smack you right in the teeth, swallow that one, chew it up, digest it, and lace up your shoes with it and ask those questions. Am I going to God about it? Do I have my faith in Him? And am I going to put feet to that faith?